So we're going to be talking about the San Manuel coffee, which is from our direct trade partner, Erlen Barrias in Honduras. He actually lives right on the border of Guatemala and Honduras in Copan, which is this beautiful old historic town with cobblestone roads. It's a very beautiful place to visit.
How did we meet Erlen? It's a bit of a story, but it's quite fun. So we were in Copan Ruinas, and we were not there for coffee reasons. We were on a trip and thought we would go to Honduras because it was so close to other places we were visiting in Guatemala. And we took a bus ride there, and we were enjoying our time.
We actually went to see a different coffee farm.
We actually went to a different coffee farm first. And we were chatting with the hostel we were staying at. And we asked, hey, so what do we do in Copan Ruinas? Small town, very small town. And they said, oh, you guys would probably appreciate this place. It's a bar, it's a brew pub, it's just around the corner, and it's a bunch of expat Canadians that have moved here. Yeah, probably would enjoy it. It's something different. We're like, okay.
They brewed their own beer.
They brewed all their own beer,
Yeah,
and it was German style beer brewed by a bunch of Canadians. And we're like, sure, we should go. So we go, and the place is full. And Chris and I are minding our own business, having a few beverages, and a fellow Canadian recognizes our accent of all things. And it's like, hey, like, what are you guys doing here? You sound like you sound like me. This is really interesting. And we said, oh, we own a coffee company, and we wanted to come to Central South America and see what's happening. We want to connect ourselves with the product, and this is early on in our business. And he's like, well, funny you mention that. I'm actually from Oakville. And we're like, you gotta be kidding me. He's like, no, I moved here and I represent and know coffee farmers. What a coincidence. A Canadian expat there while we're visiting. And from there, we traveled to go see Erlen. He was going there anyway to say hi. And we met Erlen that day. He brought us to his farm. And
which at this time, he just had one farm.
He only had one farm. We have two now, as you can see. And the rest is history. We met Erlen, and we've continued to enjoy our time roasting his coffee, visiting his farm, enjoying his presence for, well over 5 years now, which is insane. Obviously, it's a very interesting country, and I think, as Kristen has said in the past, or just recently, I shouldn't say, it's a very unique country with a lot of people who have a lot of good things to say and a lot of interesting things to do. Great coffees, great people, and yeah.
I love visiting Latin American countries. Like I said, I have been learning Spanish for around 5 years, and it's a great opportunity for me to talk to people in Spanish, and I feel like I get a little bit more out of that because they're speaking in their native tongue. I am so excited to go back to Honduras to see the progress that's being made, but also to spend more time with Erlen and get to know him better and his country better.
Honduras is a great place. I think there's a weird reputation that does not necessarily reflect the country. Even a little bit, I think. It's a very genuine, outgoing, and exciting country that just wants people to come say hi.
So Honduras in general, actually most of Central South America has lower acidity coffees. Honduras is, I would say, medium on the elevation range. It's not low elevation. It's not high elevation. Honduras isn't volcanic. Unlike Guatemala is a volcanic soil. Honduras is not a volcanic soil. So it's just a very easy coffee. It's lovely. It's such an everyday drinker. I mean, Farmstead which is from his lower elevation farm, is one of my favorite coffees. And the San Manuels in particular are at a slightly higher elevation, and the fruit grows a little bit slower, which creates more of these like little bit of a fruit note, a little bit more, a little sweeter,
I agree.
a little more complexity.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've gone to San Manuel, which is the high elevation farm, and it is high elevation by comparison to here. So we're sitting in Niagara, we're a whopping 130 meters above sea level. That's pretty pathetic in the world of anything. But thankfully, we're Canadian and incredibly continental, and that won't cause us issues. But it's wild climbing to these altitudes because they're going up there in pickup trucks, and it's very interesting the way that they climb these hills, and it's such a harrowing adventure. And trust me, we were in the truck, we were on the truck, we were very much part of something that maybe was pretty unique to us, but had no impact on Erlen and his time going up to the farm. And it was just incredible being at the San Manuel farm because it's such a high elevation. It's so incredible.
Or you could see Guatemala from the farm. You could see, because it is, like we said, very close to the border. And since we're at such a high elevation, we could see all of the tops of the mountains. We could see right over there is
absolutely.
Guatemala.
No, it was amazing. So, no, and it was just the farms are very unique in the way they work. San Manuel is very exposed and mountainous, and is growing very different varieties for that reason than Coffee Rama, which is much more. I don't want to say low altitude, but it's much more. It's very like rolling hills and red clay soils, these very like iron-rich soils, and a lot of cover. San Manuel is very open, where Coffee Rama is very covered. There's a lot of shade. There's a lot of, and interestingly, and I never would have known this, a lot of evergreen shade, which is really interesting.
And banana trees.
And avocado trees and so many other things, but just very unique differences between the two properties. Like, I want to say kind of everything. It's been a really interesting country to keep going back to. There's so much diversity from coast to other coast to inland, the mountains. It's a pretty wildly, I guess I'm talking mostly about like geology or geographically, but the people have just been lovely as well. It's just, people are engaged and excited to meet new people and do great things.
Yeah, Honduras is an absolutely beautiful country. The people are really nice, and they have actually been working a lot on the issues that people talk about with drugs and gangs. And, you can follow along with that too. But, in general, we as Canadians have to be okay getting a little outside our comfort zones and seeing different places. And yeah, we need to be a little less afraid, obviously. And I think if we can learn to meet people in different places and talk to different people.
So the red macaw, or scarlet macaw, as Kristen said, is our natural. Natural is a little bit more interesting process than a lot of coffees that you would taste. So essentially, without grave detail, coffee is a bean in the middle of what they call a coffee cherry. Looks just like a cherry. It's about the size of a cherry. And as opposed to what we do in so many times where we try and collect the juice or the pulp or the fruit, in coffee you're trying to collect the seed. And there's different ways to get to the seed. And natural is this interesting way where you essentially collect the cherry and let it ferment and essentially dissolve around the bean. When it comes to a specific point, you take that bean, you put it through a washing process or a stripping process for easier terms, and it exposes the beans. And then those beans are then dried, cleaned, and then we roast them. The second coffee with the blue macaw is the washed coffee. So ignore all the first part I said. Basically, this gets fermented immediately. Fermentation is a beautiful way of breaking down compounds. And yes, it is alcoholic. There's no alcohol in coffee, but it is an alcoholic fermentation. But alcohol as a solvent helps break down all of these components that coffee has to keep the skins and the pulp stuck to the beans. Once you do that for about a day or two, you then wash with water all of that pulp off, and that exposes the bean. You then process that and dry it, and it becomes something. So those two processes render very different coffees. And that's why we expose them differently. And that's why we have the different macaws, and that's why they're different. Same farm, different process. Very different coffees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also the natural can be a bit of a liability because it can go wrong. It can go bad. And then you have to get rid of it. So when you talk about a natural coffee, you're talking about a risk for a reward.
For sure.
So that's why they're not as common in Central American coffees. Most Central South American coffees, you'll try are wash coffees. But the natural is taking a chance that this coffee is going to be extra special.
Absolutely. And something interesting to note is, so when Kristen said, "Oh, it's interesting being, a natural coffee in South America," so excuse me, Central America. Central America's relatively, I don't want to say humid, but also has the luxury of water. Water is not scarce in Central America. A lot of these processes were developed and are much more common. I shouldn't say developed, but necessarily much more common in places like Africa. A lot of African coffees are natural because these are processes that they made where they can use a lot less water in order to process the coffee. And not that this water is being wasted, it goes back into the environment. Everything's being captured and used for other processes, but you just literally don't have that water to process coffee. You come up with unique solutions. I love that. People in coffee have such unique ways of solving problems.
So direct trade is, in my opinion, the way we all need to be going. If we want to still have coffee in the future, we have to start investing more in where the coffee is actually coming from. The coffee farmers are the ones losing out. They're the ones not making as much money. This last harvest was actually a very tough one for all different places, for all different reasons. And because of that, they're not going to be making as much money off of their farms. So if we are, investing back into that farm and giving them the money directly, that's why we call it direct trade. It's because it's going directly to the farmer. That's what direct trade means. Sometimes people use it incorrectly, but it actually means it's going directly to the farmer. Then they can take that money and invest it properly back into the land, planting the right varieties for that land, because we get all excited about coffee varieties, and there are really cool varieties that you can get. But the varieties have to work for the location. They have to work for the challenges. They have to have the right amount of yield. So, if we give the money back to the farmer, they're going to put it to the right places, is what I'm trying to say.
We approach direct trade because of what I've already said, in the situation where the thing is, we do not want to make a product that is not something that we can that we cannot, I suppose, visualize. It's something we want to see and we want to access and we want to be part of. We cannot grow coffee here. So from Manic Pixie's main template, we are there because quality comes from the farm. And if you are not at the farm, you cannot judge what is happening. Whether it's a tough season, a great season, a wet season, a dry season. Apart from that, I think all those things just resonate back down to the consumer. You're getting a appreciation and an intent from the person who's selling you the coffee. I think that's very simple.
With direct trade, we are buying most of Erland's crop, which means that he can actually plan ahead for the future. And that's the majority of what he's growing is these easy drinking washed coffees, and a little bit of natural, like we said, but it's mostly the washed coffees. And by buying those coffees, we are actually making an impact on his farm and supporting him. So I think that's one thing. People think coffee needs to be these unique, special things. But if we actually want to talk about direct trade and supporting a farmer, we need to be buying all the coffees. And then the other thing is from the other end is most people don't realize that coffee is a crop that is grown. We think we're in Niagara, we think about peach season and cherry season, how we all get excited. Coffee has its own seasons and its own challenges. It has bad years. And we need to start realizing that coffee is also a crop with its own challenges, and that there is someone on the other end that is growing it and is trying to provide for their family and their community and their country. So, yeah, I think it's important we keep that in mind.
Erland's a very ambitious and outgoing farmer. He does a lot of things to better his farm, as far as, financial considerations, farming considerations, employment considerations. And I think together we can only just improve every step of the way. And I think, we hope that he is, eventually the, exclusive partner to Manic Pixie, Everything's hand harvested, and it has to be because this is on slopes. Like I say, rolling hills. Maybe I'm being gentle. These are aggressive slopes.
Well, also coffee has to be hand picked because it ripens at different points. Absolutely. You will hear about machine harvested coffee, and what they do is they machine harvest it and then they sort it. Well, you're definitely going to be losing coffee that way. So it's actually
using coffee that could be
potentially
otherwise great coffee.
And also
because it's picked at the wrong time,
Yeah, and also you're going to be going through more machines, which necessarily is not great for the coffee. And also, who's saying that it's going to be naturally the most ripe versus a human can look at each individual cherry as they're picking it.
Yeah.
So,
I crashed Zoki's drone a couple times.
Yeah. So the first time we went there, we were actually only there for 3 days. Copen's actually, and they're continuing to grow, is a reasonably touristy area. It's pretty safe as well. Like people always ask us that. They're famous for their macaws, which is their national bird, which is on the coffee bag. And they have like a special parrot rehabilitation center where they take people's parrots that are sick or they can't take care of anymore, and they rehabilitate them. And then they actually release them in the Mayan ruins, which is so cool.
At Copan Ruins.
Yeah, at the Copan Ruins.
And it's also, PSA, you're not allowed to own a parrot in Central or South America. That's against the rules. So some of these are not just poorly cared for parrots. They are parrots that should have never been in captivity at all. And, like anything that was in captivity going to the wild, it's very complicated to make it happen. And it's incredible. Yeah. The ruins every year have a release ceremony, and it's one of the most popular times of the year.
You can also go hike in the ruins. So you'll see them like fixing them up and restoring them. It's also, it's a fun little hike around. Like Casey said, there's lots of cool different trees around you can see, lots of different birds and animals. They grow chocolate in Honduras, which, coffee and chocolate tend to grow in the same places. Their chocolate isn't like ours. It isn't incredibly smooth, but it doesn't need to be. It is so flavorful. I mean, it's coming right from these farms where they're growing it and they're processing it and then you're eating it. So it's not being shipped great distances, which is amazing. And obviously they grow all their own fruits and vegetables there as well that they use, and honey.
No, it's an incredible ecosystem they have there.
Oh,
and
it's the hot springs.
Oh,
the hot springs.
No, there's just lots of really interesting things that happen there. And so Copan Ruinas is what they call Western Honduras, which is where the mountains are. So the elevations are higher than the rest of the area. And it obviously fades down to the ocean, where, there's obviously what Erlen likes to call the Honduran Caribbean, which is Roatan.
I mean, it is the Caribbean.
It is. He just calls it that, right?
Yeah.
So we go and do these things. Now, that said, this whole story started by going to a pub and meeting a person. And that's very Canadian. But boy, I wouldn't want to be inebriated trying to traverse those streets. Cobblestone, steep streets. It's an event. It's very hard to get around Copan, but it's a beautiful little city.
So we did the hot springs there, which was these natural hot springs. And so when we first went to Honduras, I actually have been learning Spanish for many, many, many years, something I don't really share much on our Instagram. It's a personal journey. I obviously get very anxious about speaking it because I don't have a lot of practice with Spanish speakers. But when we first went, I didn't speak a lot of Spanish. Remember we went and did the hot springs, and the whole tour was in Spanish, and they were telling us which hot springs are hot and which ones are cold and which ones you should do this and I had only very small idea what they were saying, which even less than probably Casey.
I don't know.
Casey
It's a lot of fun.
Casey actually speaks French pretty well, so he was actually picking up little words from that. What else did we do? And then the last time we actually went to, like Casey said, the islands with Erlen. He's an amazing tour guide. He always talks about how he should open up a tour company so that he can...
We're excited for him to stick with coffee, though.
He can show people the beautiful things of Honduras. But seriously, if you can, you should go. It's a beautiful place, and the people are incredible. And you don't need to speak Spanish. Everyone is so considerate and kind. They'll help you. So I always recommend it.
I think we absolutely are excited to go back. We love going back as frequently as we can. I think, I'm fairly long-winded, but the thing is, we can't grow coffee here, and we never will. And it's so important for us to go to where the source of the product that we make is. We need to be connected. We've got into our own fields and now this field because of that. And to not see what's happening on the farm, to not be part of the process, it just doesn't really make sense to us.
Casey and I, at our heart, are travelers. We love to see different countries and learn about the culture and, like I said, meet people from different walks of life, both other travelers and locals. And by getting to go back to a new country and getting to discover new things every time, it's just very fulfilling.